Is that mean my mitochondria isn't functioning the way it's supposed to be?
I say, hey, what matters the most for people's sort of richness of life and purpose and meaning? The number one is absolutely human connection.
Do you see a world where it's like AI is replacing people?
Will Furness is a visionary entrepreneur and two-time CEO, joining us today for his first ever podcast appearance and his first public conversation about his own mental health journey. He transformed the mental health organization ThriveWorks into $1 billion corporation. And now he's building a groundbreaking company that brings together metabolic health, AI, and mental health in one bold vision. But behind the headlines, the high growth ventures, and the accolades is a deeply human story. One of vulnerability, resilience, and extraordinary personal accomplishment. In this conversation, Will opens up about the complexities of living with OCD, breaking the silence that so many leaders carry alone. Mental health challenges don't discriminate, and Will is living proof that even the most successful people can face and overcome anything. Success, he shows us, is built first from within. And in today's conversation, he shares how. My name is Yuvan Rasiah, and every 2 weeks, I sit down with people from all walks of life who have something meaningful to offer. Lessons, stories, and honest reflections on personal growth. These conversations aren't about having all the answers. They're about learning from people who've lived through moments of loss, change, and renewal. Welcome to Lived Words. So I want to start with this idea of mental health, right? When you think of the words mental health, what comes to mind?
I'm going to be an outlier, which I think will make the conversation fun.
Sure.
But I have a different population than what is normally considered or how people talk about mental health. So I'll start at sort of the 10,000 foot level. So it's a common misunderstanding that if you have a mental health diagnosis, that actually means we understand what the root problem is. So, okay. And I'm going to give you an example. So mental health diagnosis, whether it's anxiety, depression, OCD, schizophrenia, they're actually a grouping of symptoms. So what a clinician is doing is saying, hey, we see these symptoms going on, so we think this is the root problem.
Right.
The challenge is, up until today, it's been a black box to say, what is that problem?
Right.
So imagine you woke up tomorrow and you had a fever, and you go to the doctor and they say, you have a fever, you're hot and sweaty, that's your diagnosis, see you later. Mm-hmm. We're going to give you a med. The problem is you could have strep throat, you could have any other type of root problem or cause. Mm-hmm. So mental illness to me is a grouping of symptoms that say there's something going wrong in your body, your whole body. Right. And it's typically something to do with a metabolic health or cellular dysfunction that makes it hard for you to have healthy thought patterns or healthy relationships.
Right.
But the underlying root cause, which science has now come to understand, is the metabolic health issue. Not the mental health is sort of off by itself. So mental health to me or mental illness is understanding what is going on in your whole body, not just your brain.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's take a step back. Metabolic health. What is that? What does that mean?
Thank you. Yeah. So over the last 10 years, the pioneering research in mental health and understanding mental health has all been about understanding metabolic health. So I'll tell you a little more about it.
Yeah.
But this has now gone from, sort of theoretical science, the lab science, the clinical trials, to now the gold standard in treating serious mental illness is through metabolic health.
Right.
So Stanford and Harvard now both have metabolic psychiatry programs.
Okay.
So a metabolic framework really just means understand what's going on in your cells. So I'm going to keep it kind of simple. Everybody that's done a high school biology class, one of the first things you learn is that
hopefully most of us,
and I barely remember it. But the energy you get from your body in your cells is created by mitochondria.
Yep.
Right. That's the powerhouse of the cell.
Right. They gave us a song about that when I was in 10th grade.
I want to hear that song. This can now be part of your podcast. You can sing the song. Right. What people forget is that mitochondria actually started as bacteria. So mitochondria started as bacteria. It was a foreign object in humans. They co-evolved. Mm-hmm. Mitochondria actually have their own DNA separate from us. Mm-hmm. And if you don't take care of your mitochondria, and you don't create this great little home for them, they have dysfunction. So they have mitochondrial dysfunction, and it creates lots of problems. So it can have inflammation, you can get diabetes, you can get heart failure, and you can get mental illness.
Right.
So for, 100 years, we've treated medical issues at a cellular level. So we've said, hey, there's some sort of cellular issue that could be going on here. Let's understand it. How does mitochondrial health affect that? And we sort of pretended that the brain didn't have cells and didn't have mitochondria,
Right.
and that couldn't be a root cause with mental illness. And 10 years ago, that changed. So all recent science around mental health has been really pioneering this understanding that if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, if your mitochondria don't work effectively, what does that do in the brain?
Right.
It can cause inflammation. You might not create as much neurotransmitter. They might not talk to each other as effectively.
Right.
So metabolic health is saying what's actually going on in your body, in your cells, that can affect mental health.
So we have mitochondria in our cells.
Correct.
Right? Like the little bacteria.
Yeah.
And they're in our cells.
Correct.
They get sick.
They get sick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do they just went outside in the cold and it rained and they got cold? Like how does that happen?
So they get sick by us poisoning them. That's a good question.
Yeah.
So, and I'll give you an example. I don't know if you know anybody that has a vitamin B12 deficiency.
I have vitamin B12.
Perfect. All right.
There you go.
All right. So if you have a vitamin B12 deficiency,
Yeah.
then your mitochondria in your cells have a hard time creating and managing neurotransmitters. So if you can't get B12 into your cells and process it, then the mitochondria in the cells that create neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, etc., they can't produce those neurotransmitters, and they have a hard time managing the neurotransmitters.
Right.
So all of a sudden your mitochondria are essentially sort of running through mud instead of running seamlessly to produce neurotransmitters for you. So you have low vitamin B12. Your mitochondria in your cells that produce neurotransmitters really struggle to do it. Mm-hmm. And then what that feels like, the symptoms that people will call a diagnosis, is you have panic disorder, or you have OCD, or you have bipolar disorder. Mm-hmm. Really what's going on, the root cause for a lot of patients is they just need some more B12 for their mitochondria so they can actually make neurotransmitters.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, and is that the big thing? So B12, we all need B12?
We all need B12,
yeah.
But it's more than that. So, it's across the board, and it's almost diagnosis. It almost doesn't matter what your diagnosis is for mental health care. They all have a shared root cause of metabolic health dysfunction.
Yeah.
So it could be insulin problems. It could be inflammation, and we can go through every category. It can be a vitamin deficiency.
Right.
Another example that most people don't know. So more than 20 million people in the United States have major depressive disorder. Mm-hmm. If you have major depressive disorder and you go see your PCP or you see a therapist or psychiatrist, they're going to uniformly say, get therapy and maybe take this drug, an SSRI. What they're going to miss is that step of understanding what's going on with your general health. And for 20% of patients with major depressive disorder, they have a thyroid hormone dysregulation.
Okay.
20%, full stop.
Okay.
So 1 out of 5 patients with major depressive disorder, one of their root causes is actually a thyroid hormone problem. But we skip that step. We go right to giving them a med and maybe giving them therapy. So we're missing that step to understand metabolic health. Right. Yeah. So vitamin, hormone regulation, inflammation, all of these add up to a metabolic health equation to where your mitochondria can either work really well on your behalf, or they're sick, starving, and struggling, and it shows up as symptoms of mental illness.
So when I wake up in the morning and I feel tired and I don't want to go to school and I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to lay in bed. Right. My alarm rings. I'm like, go away.
Yes.
Is that mean my mitochondria isn't functioning the way it's supposed to be?
We'd have to peel the onion a few more times to say what's going on. But it could very well be. So I'll give you a newest study that's come out that really helps understand how mitochondria can get off track, particularly for us here in New England that don't get a lot of sun. Mm-hmm. We've now learned that mitochondria are photosensitive. So mitochondria actually need sunlight. They need infrared light to penetrate into mitochondria for them to function fully. So if you're lucky enough to live out in the Bay Area, California, and you're getting sunlight throughout the year, everything's sort of working well with your mitochondria, they're going to be able to produce more energy. If we're living in New England, and we've talked about seasonal affective disorder, no one really sort of articulated what's going on with seasonal affective disorder. But one of the big things is that your mitochondria, to keep them healthy, create a great home so that they produce energy in every cell and make neurotransmitters and make you feel happy and motivated, and dopamine, they need sunlight. They have to be exposed to sunlight. They actually are infrared photosensitive in order to grow and reproduce and be effective. So that could be one. Have you had sunlight this week?
Okay.
Yeah. Have you been outside? That actually makes a big difference.
Okay. And that's beyond just like the vitamin D aspect of that.
Correct.
It's more than just like we just need vitamin D. We actually need, it's for the mitochondria. It's a little like a larger scale almost.
Correct. You're essentially, this is sort of a disorienting way to put it, but you are a host to an organism that co-evolved with us.
Parasite.
You have a bacteria.
Okay.
You have a bacteria that has co-evolved, that is now sort of human, but has its own DNA, and that's mitochondria.
Right.
And to create a great, correct. It's very disorienting. To create a great home for them, there's a bunch of stuff you have to do, and that's, vitamins, it's exercise, it's manage inflammation, and it is definitely getting sunlight into mitochondria because they are photosensitive, and it helps them grow and reproduce. So there's a whole recipe book of like, how do I be a great host for my mitochondria so that they can do all things, whether it's fight inflammation, diseases, produce neurotransmitters. So it's a broad playbook.
Did you just like love bugs as a kid? How did we get to mitochondria health, mental health?
Yes.
Talk to me.
So, it's interesting. I have OCD.
Okay.
And, when I was 15 to 20, I really struggled with anxiety and panic disorder. Finally saw a therapist, and it took me quite a few therapists before they diagnosed me with OCD correctly.
Okay.
And after that, and we can come back and talk about that journey or more. But after being diagnosed, I did some therapy for OCD, and it was manageable. It never really got to a point where it was great until COVID, bizarrely.
Yeah.
So beginning of COVID, like everybody else,
your mental health got better during COVID?
My mental health got better. Yeah. And very unusual story.
Yeah.
So I'm home. I'm not traveling for work. I'm definitely more overweight than I want to be.
Right.
And I'm reading all this literature that people that are overweight are a much higher risk for dying, getting admitted because of COVID. And the reason why is sort of once you have too much inflammation in your body, you're more susceptible to sort of the worst variants of COVID or worse symptoms. So I found this book by a Harvard endocrinologist. It was called Always Hungry. And it's basically all about metabolic health inflammation and how to sort of manage your metabolism. This is sort of caloric metabolism. And then I'm like, all right, this is interesting. I'll use this to sort of manage my health, my general health, and my weight back in order. So I start following this diet, which is sort of a low inflammation diet. It was going to improve my metabolic health, general metabolism. My weight starts coming off. And then I noticed for the first time in 20 years, my OCD is way better. Like the symptoms are better. The sort of lows of OCD were better. How much time I would spend on intrusive thoughts were better.
Right.
And at the time I just thought, maybe I'm less stressed. I'm home. I'm not traveling.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I read another book a short while after that by Chris Palmer, who's a Harvard psychiatrist, called Brain Energy, that I finally understood that metabolic health isn't just in your body. Metabolic health is the reason why most mental illness goes unsuccessfully treated. Why so many patients with severe mental illness get on meds and they never get better. So I never connected at the time that by managing my general metabolic health, it actually was going to improve my OCD. It wasn't until reading this book by Chris Palmer, who's a head of Harvard psychiatry, called Brain Energy, that I started to understand that the root cause of all mental illness, the shared root cause across all these diagnoses, is metabolic health. So that's how I bizarrely backed into it by trying to reduce my risk for COVID and cut down any type of inflammation in my body, that I realized and sort of stumbled upon this work by Chris Palmer and research from Stanford and Harvard in the last 5 years showing that managing metabolic health is as effective, if not more effective, a lever than most medicines are today or therapy.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
Good question. Yeah.
let's talk about OCD.
Yeah.
You had OCD. You've gone on your OCD journey through metabolic health, through working on your metabolic health. Just talk to me. Like, what does that look like? What is OCD for you?
So there's a couple of common variants of OCD. One of them is compulsions. One sort of common grouping is called intrusive thoughts, which is what I have. So it's basically, looping of thoughts that you feel like by having these thoughts, you feel differently about yourself. It sort of changes your identity and you get stuck trying to sort of manage the occurrence down and sort of always trying to find a way to sort of make that less common. And we can talk about the metabolic health later.
Yeah.
The challenge with most therapy, when you go to get therapy for serious mental illness, particularly OCD, is that most therapists are actually not trained to treat serious mental illness. And OCD itself has an effective gold standard for managing OCD. It's called exposure and response therapy. And most therapists don't know how to do it. So I went to several...
Therapists don't know how to treat OCD?
Correct. Yeah.
That's...
Correct.
How does that work?
So most therapists... and by the way, I went to 4 therapists until somebody finally said, I'll work on OCD with you.
Right.
She said, I don't know how to treat OCD. I'm not an OCD therapist. We'll buy a book and we'll go through it together.
Okay.
And that's when I first started to actually get some help. So the way that therapists work, and you can become a therapist through all different routes. You can be a social worker, you can get a master's in family counseling, but most of those routes sort of preference you for your training is done with folks that are lower acuity. And it's often not done with folks that have serious mental illness.
Right.
And so for a lot of therapists, they're just not comfortable with treating serious mental illness because of the risk, and they haven't had enough training to be comfortable on that. And unlike most therapy that is going to work on like how you manage, cognitive behavior therapy, how you manage relationships, for serious mental illness like OCD, bipolar, it's a whole separate track and approach for therapy. So for OCD, it's exposure and response therapy, which is really a different program than most people sort of think about therapy being.
But Mr. Furness, the internet told me that therapy is the solution to all my problems.
Unfortunately, by the way, I'm a big believer in therapy. Okay. I'm also a big believer in medicine, where appropriate. The problem is we're skipping the very first step, which is saying, what is the problem we're trying to solve before we use a solution? Therapy is a solution. Meds can be a solution.
Yeah.
We skipped a step to say, what is the underlying problem that is causing the mental health symptoms? And that underlying problem is often a metabolic health one. So I love therapy as a solution. I love certain psychiatry meds for certain people as a solution. Let's understand the problem first.
Right.
And, you could take a group of 10 patients that have OCD, and they could have 10 different reasons or problems why they have OCD symptoms. So we got to get that first step in to say, let's find out what the real problem is before we come up with a solution.
So let's say I'm having intrusive thoughts or compulsions.
Right.
What do I do? Where do I go? Do I Google metabolic health? And
and we'll talk about the new company we've started, NeuroVitals, but unfortunately, there's not an ideal solution right now. Yeah. So if you live near Harvard and you live near Stanford, you're good to go. They both have started metabolic psychiatry programs. So if you're lucky enough to be the 1/10 of 1% of the population living near these 2 premier academic medical centers, you can go and actually get a metabolic health workup and understand how you can manage your metabolic health to reduce your mental health problems or eliminate them. The problem is that's not a very scalable solution for the planet. So we're starting a new company, myself and co-founders, we're just getting going, called NeuroVitals, which is going to be a scaled digital solution where you can understand your metabolic health, including labs, and have AI augmented solutions that works with you all the time to improve your metabolic and mental health at the same time. Yeah, but unfortunately, there's not a great solution right now.
Right. Okay, I think AI, and you mentioned therapy, and I feel like I see always that people are talking about AI and therapy.
Yes.
AI could be used in mental health care, in healthcare at all, because is it too impersonal?
Right.
What are your thoughts?
The future of therapy is AI delivered therapy. There's a bunch of risks to it right now, and I'll sort of caveat where I think it's good, where I think it's not good right now. So again, I love traditional talk therapy. I think if you're lucky enough to afford traditional talk therapy and have that human interaction, I think it's very meaningful. But a lot of the population on the planet cannot.
Right.
Harvard Business Review just put out a new set of data showing that the number one use of LLMs right now, so ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera, the number one use case is actually people getting therapy and companionship out of them. So people are already using AI to get therapy. The challenge is Stanford HAI Center, which is sort of responsible use of AI, has documented and shown that right now AI therapy can create a lot of problems. So it can create mania, it can worsen serious mental illness. So personally, I don't believe that AI therapy is ready yet for the masses. The way it's being done, I think, isn't ideal.
Right.
I think it's absolutely going to be the norm, and I think we got to continue building towards it. But anybody that wants great therapy right now, I would be very cautious about just jumping on ChatGPT and managing serious mental illness with that. It's not. It can be very dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I look at a number like that. The number one use of generative LLMs is therapy.
Correct.
Is that a problem? Is that a societal issue? What do you? Because I think about that and it's like, man, that's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah, what's indicative of is that there's really an underlying need, right? So there's definitely a need that people want more support and help. It's indicative that there isn't enough access still in therapy. Whether it's because it's too expensive, it's hard to find, it can't be done virtually. So it tells me there is a supply and demand mismatch. What it also tells me, though, is that a lot of these models are being built in a way that is borderline sycophantic, right? So OpenAI just released ChatGPT 5. And one of the things that Sam Altman said was, hey, we realized that ChatGPT 4 was a bit too sycophantic, meaning it would always agree with you. And a good therapist, or if somebody can, and we might create a really great AI talk therapy model that can challenge people and challenge their views and challenge them to go through a difficult process, I think that can be a great use case. But unfortunately, a lot of folks' engagement in therapy right now that's AI driven is going to be reinforcing a bubble view that could be dangerous if they have mania or they're really struggling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you see the development of AI and the way that it's developing now, and even through NeuroVitals, that can be changed. We can work on that.
It can be changed. Yeah. I think most of the AI talk therapy products out there were built off of older AI models that tend to be a bit sycophantic.
Right.
And, tend to be more focused on keeping customer engagement, which means flattering the person that's using it, seeming very loyal to the person. The newer models, I'm very hopeful about ChatGPT 5, but the newer models that I think are built to be a bit more neutral and a lot more focused on sort of the truth and not just sort of focused on customer retention and engagement. I think those can be better foundations for how we build AI therapy. And I think the research out of Stanford's HAI Center also emphasizes this is 100% possible. It can be done. And just today, what exists can be very dangerous. So it's going to happen. I'm fully supportive of it.
Yeah.
I think there are billions of people that need more support and need more help. And we should be able to deliver a product that actually doesn't have to get a pre-approval through United Healthcare or Optum, and you only get 8 sessions and you don't get anywhere. So it's absolutely necessary for the world.
And that's free therapy in a sense.
It is.
Free AI therapy.
Correct.
Because it can be accessed anyone, anywhere.
Correct.
It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
And is that, obviously there's huge kind of potential there.
There's huge potential. The one caveat I would sort of get people to think about is, we're so lucky in the United States and most first world nations to not have to think about that our health information is protected.
Yes.
So whether it's HIPAA or PHI.
Yes.
And it does alarm me a little bit, the number of people that are getting on ChatGPT or some other forum that their data can be used for whatever purpose, whether it's going to be ad targeting in the future or anything discoverable. So it does worry me a little bit that right now they're using ostensibly a free product. Anytime a product is free when it's a digital product, what's actually for sale is you, the customer. Right? And we learned that with ads years ago with Facebook and Google. If something's free and it's digital, what they're selling is you. Right? They're selling your information. So I would just caution people to pay attention to what type of health information they actually put into ChatGPT that could be shared, and there's no reason legally why they can't share it.
Do you see, just kind of thinking about that, right? So there's a certain limit as to the capabilities of AI in that sense, in my mind, because if we're not able to share, everything,
yes,
then you're limited in the scope in which how much can a robot treat because they don't know everything, right? And so,
good point.
Do you see a world where it's like AI is replacing people in terms of like therapy and conversation and mental health, or is it an additional component?
I think it's going to replace them, but if I'm a patient that's looking for a therapy and it's free, I would really pause and say, how is it free? All right, they're selling my data. Even if you sign up for a paid service and it's just AI and there's no human, I would really look at that user agreement and say, I'm sort of sharing the hardest, deepest truths about myself. I want to make sure that information is protected, and it should be like any other healthcare experience, even though it's AI, right? Even though there's no human involved. So I'll give you an example of one reason why I think AI therapy will absolutely replace the human element in the future. So Harvard and Wharton got together and ran a study over the last year. It's about to be published next month. And what they were looking at is to say the underlying human connection in therapy, if that can't be replicated in AI, then AI therapy will never be as effective, right? You can train an AI therapist to deliver cognitive behavior therapy extremely well, right? It can be an algorithm. Right. You could train it to understand, what people are talking about in speaking patterns and break that down into diagnosis effectively. But if a big part of therapy's effectiveness is actually the human connection, and you can't replicate that, then AI therapy might never be as good. Right. So Harvard and Wharton got together and ran this study recently where they basically were just checking to say, hey, how effective can AI therapy or chatbots be at reducing loneliness? And that's sort of one way to sort of flag human connection. And I will tell you, one person involved in the study is not a big proponent of AI therapy. They actually think it's a terrible idea. Yeah. And I think they were running this study to show that this really has limitations and it can never work. And fortunately for us, the consumer, and the future of AI therapy, what they found was that AI therapy was as effective, or AI chatbots were as effective as at reducing loneliness as an in-person therapist or an in-person human connection. So there is something about the human brain where if we feel understood, it reduces our loneliness. Right. We feel more validated as a human. So I think the AI potential for therapy is limitless, and it's going to come soon. I think it will be as effective and more.
Do you think there's a physical aspect to, like a literal physical interaction aspect to human conversation that maybe missing or different with a robot and an AI where, I'm on my computer on my desk typing to something, or even on a whatever, speaking to something from using like voice type or something.
Yes.
And versus like actually sitting in a room having a conversation.
And there's definitely studies showing that your brain does process experiences differently based on is somebody in the room with you or not. And you have body language, you're picking up more momentum. I do think that when you think about, hey, what's the minimum effectiveness that AI therapy should be able to deliver before it's as good as sort of going to a therapist when that's a lot more expensive, your brain is pretty wired that if it's an audible conversation, right? You're not reading something, somebody's talking back to you and it's human-like. What that study from Harvard and Wharton, done over the last couple months showed is that your brain does process it as much of a human connection as talking to somebody in person. So, the effectiveness of therapy, not only sort of the modality, the curriculum, how you train people to sort of rethink or process memories, or how they interact with others, all that curriculum matters, but everybody always thought there was sort of a secret sauce of that human element connection. And that might have been I think it's overstated the possibility of not doing that with AI. I think we definitely could. And just alone being able to reduce somebody's loneliness scores shows that you really can create much more of a human experience in our brain wiring, processing than people anticipate with AI.
Got it. And when I think about like the need for therapy, right? The need for AI therapy, the need for human therapy, I think there's a part of me that thinks, okay, like as human beings in society, with friends, with connections, with in life, is this something that not we should need, but almost, is this something that we should need in the sense that is it a societal problem that AI therapy is a number one use of AI?
Yeah.
Because we are actually having the conversations with real people.
I'm all about so the longest running happiness survey, done by Harvard over 30 years, tracking people, say, hey, what matters the most for people's sort of richness of life and purpose and meaning? And the number one is absolutely human connection. How much human connection, how much purpose you have for these humans around you, how you help them. Like, we are very much a tribal species. I think you're right. I think, AI therapy being the number one use case is definitely because people in part feel more isolated. I also think we're just sort of, our humanity is bombarded by digital use all day, by apps, by this sort of, disconnection from what really should be meaningful and purposeful. So I'm all for a multimodal approach to solving mental health care. It's not just AI therapy.
For sure.
If I could give somebody a simple prescription, like eat well, exercise way more than you think, get around loved ones and have a purpose in life. And then absolutely, if you can afford it and or AI therapy is very effective, do that. Like anytime we could sort of grow and coach ourselves and challenge our beliefs and say, how do I make myself a better human? It matters. But the therapy shouldn't be the tip of the spear to living a full life.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we get stuck in a cycle, right? Where it's, I'm lonely or I'm struggling and so I don't go out.
Right.
So I get more lonely.
Correct.
And so then I don't go hang out with my friends because I feel like they're going to judge me, or I don't feel included, or they don't really want me around.
Yeah.
And then we stay inside more, right?
Yes.
We kind of exacerbate. And I almost wonder if because of the practicality of AI therapy, where it's something it's kind of, for lack of a better term, quick and easy, right? You can do it whenever.
Right.
You kind of you don't need to like book a session with someone.
Yes.
You can kind of just go and do it.
Correct.
You can get that feeling of like, okay, I feel a little bit better. Then I can get you out of your room.
Right.
I need to get out of my room sometimes.
100%.
And get you to people. And actually build that, like you said, that actual human connection.
Correct.
That you cannot replicate in other ways, but as you can't get out of it.
Yes. Yeah, I think, again, therapy is very powerful. I'm a strong believer in therapy.
Absolutely.
Still a strong believer in certain meds for certain people in the right conditions. It can really sort of help give you just enough support to take the next step. But let's dig in a little bit more there. So, all of our sort of desire to create meaning in life or connect with others or do something with purpose, what drives us when it comes to the molecular side of it or metabolic side is dopamine, right? Yeah. So dopamine is that neurotransmitter that makes you motivated and wants you to get out to say, hey, there's risk, but it's worth it. There's a purpose. I connect with somebody. I might meet a loved one or a partner.
Right.
And guess what actually creates dopamine and drives dopamine? Your mitochondria, your metabolic health. So therapy can help. Therapy can be a nudge. Therapy can give you that extra bit of motivation to get out there. But a lot of what drives that ability to sort of go after that reward is dopamine and neurotransmitter. You want more dopamine, you can manage your dopamine. You can manage your metabolic health. You can manage your mitochondria's ability to produce dopamine and regulate effectively.
So it really comes back to that.
All of mental health and all of behavior management has a shared root, fundamental cause and understanding or drive around metabolic health. Like, as every cell in your body, no matter what it's doing, if it's fighting inflammation, it's growing something, it's repairing something, it's producing neurotransmitters, every one of those functions lives off of the energy from mitochondria.
Okay, let's talk about Your Vitals,
please.
Yeah. And this is off of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Your Vitals is transforming mental health care by uniting cutting-edge metabolic science with advanced AI. Sounds awesome, by the way. How do we get to, so you have your journey through OCD, you're trying to figure out, you learn about metabolic health, you get to read brain energy, right? You're working with this therapist. What drives you to say, okay, I want to create something?
Love it. Yeah.
How did you get here?
There was two experiences really, and they were both work related. So I was lucky enough to become the CEO of ThriveWorks, which is the second largest mental health care company in the US.
Yeah.
We had 300 locations. We did virtual visits. When I left, we were doing more than 30,000 visits a week, 30,000 patients a week. So basically treating a whole city every week with therapy visits. We had talk therapists and psychiatrists. And even with seeing over 1 million patients a year and being the CEO of one of the largest mental health care companies in the US, when I came across Chris Palmer's book about the understanding of metabolic health and how it drives mental health, and started talking to folks in the company, psychiatrists, talk therapists about this, I realized what is a sort of very common issue in all of medicine, which is anytime there's new science that comes out, it takes 14 years to get from science to practice. So anytime something new comes out, it takes a long time for it to get adopted. So we were doing great work at ThriveWorks. I still recommend people to go to ThriveWorks. It's a great therapy company.
Absolutely.
And it's doing therapy and it's doing psychiatry. What it's missing is that step to actually understand metabolic health. So I'll fast forward a little bit.
Sure.
My most recent role as CEO, I was running a multinational clinical research company. So working with Moderna and Pfizer and Eli Lilly and testing new medicines to say, what could it do for folks? And I noticed that a lot of the conversations I was having and clinical research companies were having were about repurposing GLP-1s to do something around mental health. So substance abuse disorder, looking at Alzheimer's. And it brought me back to those moments in ThriveWorks when I started to understand that all of mental health care is missing a step, which is the metabolic health. Mm-hmm. So there's this big gaping hole in mental health where we're missing the metabolic health. And I saw pharma running after it saying, hey, we can help on this with a new medicine. And that might be great, but there's a lot of interventions that are low cost to no cost that we can actually take care of. So I looked back at my experience as a CEO of that clinical research company, CEO of one of the largest talk therapy companies, and said, the only way we're going to actually deliver really true gold standard mental health is to start over, to build from the ground up, right? Pharma does a lot of good things. They're not going to be that motivated to help you fix your diet or exercise or understand what's going on with your hormone functioning, because they're not going to sell you something from that, right? Yeah. They're going to sell you a new med.
It's all business.
Yeah, it's all business. And again, there's some great meds, there's some great pharma companies.
Yeah.
But to really solve mental health care, we got to start over from the beginning. And we have to help patients understand that by addressing their metabolic health and their mental health together, they're going to get a much better return. They're going to get much better improvements. And I'll give you a couple of trials that sort of really illustrate the point. But I realized I'm sort of a renegade insider, and all of our other co-founders are. We understand the mental health care system. We understand the medical system. You have to change it from the inside, but you have to change it from the beginning. You have to build it from the ground up. So we're starting this new company. So I'll just sort of give you one example. Harvard, McLean, and Stanford both ran studies where they had patients getting admitted to their inpatient psych facility. So patients that are at the worst moment in their life, worst crisis, very sick and struggling. They get admitted, and they're getting admitted for OCD and bipolar and schizophrenia and major depressive disorder. And they randomize them to either the normal line of treatment, which has tons of side effects, is very sedating, you put on weight, or a metabolic health approach. They changed their diet. Most often it was a ketogenic diet, and everything that they could do on the metabolic health side.
Yeah.
What they found in both studies, and the recent one from Stanford was conducted in the past year, is that patients had a 30 to 50% improvement over medicine by taking the metabolic health route. They were discharged from the inpatient facility 20% sooner. So by treating the metabolic health underpinnings, even in the worst case scenario, and a patient that has the worst moment of their life, it still had a massive impact. Imagine what we can do for patients that have even mild to moderate mental health issue, and no one's helped them understand their metabolic health. Right. So we got to change mental health care and rebuild it from the ground up, and that's what we're doing in NeuroVitals.
And so you had this idea, this from working in healthcare, working in the ThriveWorks,
correct,
and working in the pharmaceutical industry, where we're not connecting the dots.
Correct.
There's a lack of connection.
Right.
And so NeuroVitals is connecting that, right? And that's why we have AI.
Correct.
We have metabolic health. We have mental health care.
Correct.
So you had this idea. What happens? Where do you go? How do you start? Right?
See,
I've never started a company. So tell me, how does it work?
You start by having a group of similarly rebel-minded folks that want to rebuild an industry from the ground up. So for me, and I've coached and mentored startups for a long time, both at MIT, at an incubator, a startup accelerator called Mass Challenge here in Boston. But the core of every great startup is a group of people that really have a shared passion, because you're going to pivot 10 different times. You're going to get customer feedback. What you need is a group of folks that have a shared mission in mind, that they care about one core thing and they all agree on that truth.
Right.
So I started with finding other co-founders that really believed mental health care didn't just have an access problem, it had a recipe, design, quality issue. Right. We had to rebuild mental health care from the ground up to include metabolic health. So I was lucky enough to hire both a chief scientific officer, a chief product and AI officer, chief growth officer, sort of early on.
Yeah.
We added a great chief financial officer, and, we'll chat a bit about the co-founders in general, but step one was getting a team of rebels together that really understood, hey, this is the fundamental problem we're going to solve, and let's just get after it.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. I think there's an aspect of when you're starting something, I think it's very hard to start something by yourself, right?
Correct.
And you had an idea, and I think it's really interesting that the first thing that you pointed out to me is you found a team, right? You found people to work with.
Correct.
And that's such an interesting thing, because I feel like that applies in so many ways in life, and like that's a
correct
kind of a.
You gotta have your tribe.
You do.
You gotta have your tribe.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to have people. It was a big thing even with this project, where I'm trying to figure out who's going to work with me, and how can I get people who are inspired, who are interested,
right,
and finding those real connections. I think that's a
really makes sense.
Really important point that you're making there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about. All right, so you have your co-founders, you have your team.
Yes.
Building something. What do we got?
So
going on?
Peter Thiel has a great book, 0 to 1, and definitely the hardest step is the very first step, right? When you're taking a company from 0 to 1. I've been lucky enough at prior companies like at ThriveWorks to raise capital before. So we did a Series B when I was a CEO. We got a unicorn valuation, so we had a $1.2 billion valuation. So I've done a lot of fundraising, but being at a pre-seed stage where you don't even have a product yet, you really have to articulate hey, what's that vision? Where are we headed? What's the story? And ultimately, who's the customer that I'm helping the most? So I spend a lot of time talking to patients with serious mental illness, talking to psychiatrists to try to say, what would be the most valuable for that person? Who's the customer that's going to benefit the most?
Know your audience.
Know your audience and like, what problem am I really solving for them?
Right.
There's a lot of startups, and again, I've been lucky enough to mentor startups at MIT and Mass Challenge. There's a lot of startups that first get excited about an idea or a tool, and they don't start by saying, what problem am I solving? What customer has this problem? How do I most help them? And then build off of that. So, we have our team, we have a shared mission of, hey, we want to rebuild mental health care, particularly serious mental health care. But step 2 is really understanding and talking to the customer directly to say, what would be the most impactful of a lever for you and help you on this journey to try to live a more fulfilling life.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So you've been a CEO, you're founder right now, you were CEO at ThriveWorks, you served in a lot of leadership capacities.
Right.
Can we talk about leadership?
Absolutely.
What does that look like? How has that been for you?
Yeah, and leadership is just putting everybody else's interest above yourself. Like it's interesting. People will often talk about leadership in terms of like a heroic almost stance. Like I led the team into X or Y. Like to me, leadership is more servant leadership. Like you have a mission or objective and you're putting yourself last over the whole team and figuring out how do you make everybody sort of work effectively together to solve a problem that you couldn't do individually. So we can go all different directions in leadership, whether it's like coaching style or what type of culture you create. But to me, leadership is trying to solve a problem that you can't do on your own, right? The problem's just too big and you have to sort of put the whole team above yourself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I think like you said, we look at leadership like it's this, like we're leading the team. And I think there's a sense of responsibility, but also a sense of pride in being a leader, right? How do you balance feeling like I'm leading a thing, but also giving credit, balancing, where other ideas are coming from, and leading humbly, I suppose?
Yes. That's actually a great problem dichotomy. And I think a lot of leaders, particularly early leaders, they can stumble the first couple of years as a leader thinking that they have to know everything, that they really have to have that mantle of sort of shininess and authority to be effective. MIT has some great research. It's called Theory X versus Theory Y, but they have some great research. They partnered with Google and looked at reams and reams of data at Google to say who are the most effective managers and leaders. And one of the core things that came out of that study and now is sort of, I think the best organizational psychology principles about being a leader is that the most effective teams and the most effective leaders show a lot of vulnerability. And what that means is often saying, hey, I don't know how to solve this. I don't know how to do this one skill, and letting others show up. It also means letting people understand that they're going to make mistakes, right? That if they work with intention and sort of goodness, right? They have sort of good intent,
right?
That even when they have mistakes made, that, we're just going to move on. But a lot of leaders make a mistake of sort of not showing any vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And that quickly creates a toxic culture because you don't make great decisions if you're not willing to admit when you don't know something, you're needing more information, or it's not your skill set that you can best sort of weigh in on. So the leader, and there's a lot of organizational psychology around, power differences. So, we are tribal. We've talked about that a bunch of times today. Being tribal, we naturally sort of respect hierarchies. And because of that, when there's a power gap, so either you work for somebody or they're considered to have more status, it can create differences. And your willingness to tell that leader something's going wrong, or I think that's a bad route, or here's where we go. An effective way to minimize that power gap so that the teams really weigh in more is to just share more vulnerability from yourself when you make a mistake or when you're struggling.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah.
Putting you on the spot here.
No, I'll give you a fun one. Stanford Business School did this really fun study where they took a bunch of kindergartners. Yeah. They gave them a big pile of pasta and some tape. and they said, build as big a tower as you can in 30 minutes. So the kindergartners worked together and they took all these bits of pasta and they taped it together and they built a tower. And then they brought in groups of MBA students from Stanford. And then they brought in CEOs and they brought in partners from law firms. And at the end of the day, the group that built the highest, most stable structure was the kindergartners.
Wow.
And the reason why is that they're willing to fail. They're willing to try new ideas. There was no sense of status. There was no power dynamics. So, that's a simple illustration of you have to, when you're a leader, create a team where you do everything possible to eliminate power dynamics, where people can have shared vulnerability, and then shared purpose really shows up as sort of the strongest motivating factor. But
Do we get too caught up in like labels?
Absolutely. I mean,
I am this, I am that, and you are not this.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something I've had to really work on and practice, that I consider myself very informal and down to earth. And it's taken me a long time as a leader to realize that no matter what, if there's a difference in hierarchy or status that's perceived, it's going to make it harder for people to sort of be vulnerable and share what they believe might be right or share a risk they're concerned about. So you have to wire that into everything about your team.
Yeah.
You can start off team meetings by just everybody sharing something outside of work that they're struggling with. And that's sort of a safe way to talk about something you're worried about, and you can be vulnerable. That is not you admitting you're worried about something at work. So there's little things you can do repeatedly to create a culture where people feel like it's safe to sort of disrupt that power dynamic or status dynamic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so what have you done as a leader to counteract that? Because even today, at ThriveWorks, at NeuroVitals, how have you, because yes, as you said, down to earth, right? Try to be informal, but there is a perception.
There is a perception.
Yeah. Right. And therefore I have to do certain things. How can you make it a comfortable environment for someone who, even especially someone who's new,
right?
To feel like they can be a member of the team?
That, for me particularly, if I'm new to a company or new to a team and we try to get to know each other, I always try to share a couple of examples where I failed in life. My very first job in high school, I worked at KFC. I got fired by KFC.
Wow.
And they told me I wasn't KFC material.
Okay.
Which, sort of a crazy thing to,
what is KFC material?
I'm still to this day wondering why I wasn't KFC material, but, I'm past that milestone.
Colonel Sanders got some high set.
Yeah, really, truly. So, I think you have to create those moments early on where you share vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So, I'll talk about moments in my own life where I failed. I'll try to bring to every team meeting. At the beginning of every team meeting, we'll talk about stuff outside of work, what's going well and not going well, so that they see I can struggle on certain things. Right. When very early on working with teams, if I'm not sure of something, I'll pause and say, hey, do we have the same vision of where we're heading? Do we have the same understanding of our problem? And then say, I don't know what our solution is. Let's work on it. So you really have to create these moments where there's enough sort of breathing room in the group to share stuff that might seem kind of risky to bring up.
Do you have a go-to example? Here's when I failed.
So I do regularly share getting fired from KFC.
Yeah.
I spent the first half of my career in finance and accounting. And there's another story
that's a big change.
A big change.
Yeah.
I wanted to get closer to actually building stuff and being an operator and actually owning teams rather than just reporting the numbers. Meaningful, but just wasn't for me. But yeah, the KFC getting fired story. And then I worked at a startup years ago. I was running finance and accounting, and our very first quarter where we did a set of financials, I worked overnight, worked 31 hours, got the financials done before the board meeting, gave it to the CFO. He went into the board meeting, and I realized about 20 minutes later that I had added it up wrong. And then instead of us being profitable, we were losing about $40 million a year. What? And it was our first set of financial statements. And I had to go into the boardroom and try to discreetly bring the CFO out. And I didn't know if he had reported the numbers or not, and explain to him sort of what went wrong. Luckily, really seasoned, effective, thoughtful leader. And after digesting the news as best he could, later in the day came back and thanked me. I later got a promotion really just because of that, because he realized, I was somebody he could trust to deliver news no matter what it was going to be. But
That's a hard thing to do. It's hard to board meeting and be like, hey, can I
and our very first set of financials, which was going to be a bellwether where the company was headed. So I try to regularly, when I get to know teams, to share as much as I can, to create that sense of vulnerability. The other thing that can really help disrupt that sort of power gap that people can perceive in hierarchies is to just spend a moment understanding where people really do have something unique to offer to the team, so that it's just not a point of comparison, right? So if it's a title, they can compare. If it's a degree somebody has or not, they can compare. But everybody's bringing someone to the table, whether it's a unique perspective or unique skill set. And if you can pull that out early on, and you can do it through simple ways, like you can do something silly that, every time somebody joins a team, they could talk about a special skill they bring. So I'll give you one example. There's a really big call center in India. It's called Wipro.
Okay.
The call center, it's one of the largest in India. They were struggling with turnover year after year, just massive turnover, a really hard job. And they said, we want to do something to improve the culture and the team dynamic and do something to improve turnover. So they ran like a science experiment. They randomized new employees into a couple different cohorts. And one cohort was, they got a sweater that said Wipro, it had their name on it, and they got a mentor. And the mentor would sort of like coach them along and make them excited and talk about what Wipro means and the cultures and the values. The other group, what they did instead was, early on, they met with a mentor, but they asked that employee, what sort of one useful skill or useful perspective do you bring to this team that's going to make it stronger? That was it. It was something like 100% improvement in turnover, that one intervention. And the reason why it was so effective is it really got rid of a lot of the power dynamic. It had people feel like they were bringing something meaningful to the table right away. It allowed them to be authentic, which means the teams could be more high functioning. So, there's countless small interventions you can do as a leader where you allow people to become authentic in themselves, bring something authentic to the table, and create an environment that feels really safe, that teams can just take off. So,
Right. Absolutely. I actually want to go back to the board
please.
meeting story. That takes guts, right? And to make a mistake, acknowledge you made a mistake, go in there and say, hey, I made a mistake. Talk me through, like, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? So it sounds terrifying. Like, oh my God.
It was. And I hadn't slept for 30 hours. And, I'd just been promoted to the accounting manager. It was definitely nerve wracking. I think I've been a long time practitioner of Stoic philosophy, and, trying as best I can to sort of take that moment that feels overwhelming and back up and say, what is this moment going to mean in 50 years? What does this really mean to myself as like my identity? It can only bring, in my view, in my experience, it can only bring that stress level down to like a 10 to 7. But by doing that, you can get to a point where you can pause long enough to say, like, who am I as a person? And if I'm that person, what would I do with this? Getting a side note on mental health, Ethan Cross, who's a psychologist at University of Michigan, has some great books. One of them is called Chatter. And he has some great books of sort of managing yourself in those moments that are very stressful, and sort of cutting the chatter down far enough, the noise down far enough, that you can really pause and say, who am I as a person? What would that person do? And just asking yourself that question and sort of making it a third person, even saying like, what would Will do in this situation, can ground you a bit more so that you can get through that stress. But I don't know, maybe I was sleep deprived and thought it wouldn't even be that bad of a interruption. But all I knew was I had to sort of get in there and tell him, like, this is about to go off the rails before he presented.
That feels like a kind of maybe a slept on leadership quality, where the sense of being able to walk into a room to admit something that you're wrong, right? That's the right thing to do. Especially if you just got promoted, you worked so hard on this, like, and to go and be like, hey, I messed up. a hard thing to do. But even, and also, I think, and like you said, to put into perspective what's happening, right? Where it's, well, how will this affect me in 50 years? What's my life gonna look like? Does this moment, not that it doesn't matter, but does this moment matter in the grand scheme of my life? That is a really interesting thing, because I think that we often get caught up in everything, like every detail, right? Where it's like, there's so much happening. I need to do this. I need to do this. There's so many things. I can't get them all done. I have to, all these different things. It's overwhelming, right? It's just, there's a lot of pressures, right? External pressures. A lot of things that sometimes we can't even control that are happening. Like, yeah, you make a mistake, but like you can't control what happens now,
right?
Unless you go do something, right?
Correct.
And so I think making the decision to say like, okay, I'm going to go do something. Let's stop the noise,
right?
The chatter,
Correct.
and go do something. Be actionable. I think that's a really interesting thing that a lot of people miss about leadership, about holding yourself accountable, and about making a mistake and being able to recover from mistakes.
Yes. Yeah, and, looking back on it, the CFO at the time, and I'm reflecting a little bit more, I think he had created enough moments with him as a leader to sort of share where he had made mistakes or things had gone wrong or where there was a failure, that I think he created sort of just enough meat on the bone that, I would like to think I would have done the right thing either way, but I think he made it easier to go in that moment, even in the midst of like a critical board meeting. It's thinking it through a little bit more. I think he created a nice virtuous cycle that, helped me carry through a tough moment and allowed me to sort of articulate it well as I'm working with teams about what really matters at the end of the day. And that's living by those values that are going to let you sleep at night and feel like you're living a purposeful life, because we do just have one life.
Absolutely. Has there been a moment where you have felt like what you did to make yourself to be a good leader, to make that people working under you feel comfortable, almost like the reverse of this situation where someone else felt comfortable saying, hey, I messed up to you?
Yeah, yes. There's definitely been many moments where folks have brought really hard problems to me. Yeah, really hard problems that, I was glad they were able to sort of share a risk or worry. Another sort of like tip or technique that I try to do is, when I'm going through periods at work where I know everybody's stressed, I'll often kick off meetings by just saying, what are you worried about? And years ago, I worked at Dartmouth Teaching Hospital, and the chief medical officer there, he would always open his meetings with, we don't worry alone. Like as a team, we worry together, and would talk about what he's worried about that week. And so, yeah, there's definitely been moments where teams have brought stuff to me, calamity, mistakes. It happens, right? Their organizations run by humans. Yeah. So, yeah,
I think it's fascinating to think about how the leaders that you have worked with have influenced the way that you lead.
Yes.
Right. And even like the example you just gave, where he start meetings with thinking about what's worrying him, what's worrying people, and you like to start meetings with the same philosophy.
Correct.
And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We learn from each other. We grow as people and as leaders.
Totally. And by the way, that's Greg Myers, who's now, I think he's the CEO of Mass General.
Wow.
But I'll give him credit. Like just a wonderful way to sort of create an environment where people felt like the stress of what we were doing was on everybody's shoulders, and you could worry together.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Want to end this podcast? We always end with the final question.
Let's do it.
What are some words that you choose to live by, and why?
Memento mori is sort of a common Stoic phrase, but I think anything in Stoic philosophy where you can take your purpose and what you're living for and make it so consistent and steady that no bit of stress can throw you off. But, living for that purpose. And another sort of way to interpret memento mori is just welcoming everything that happens to you.
Right.
I think the Stoics and the Buddhists had a lot in common, which is the more you can sort of accept that everything that happens to you in life you can do something with it. You have a control over how you respond. You have control over what you do with it. You have control into how you can turn it into a new purpose or new good for somebody. So just being accepting of everything that happens to you, sort of welcoming it in, which by the way is sort of the root of managing all OCD, coincidentally, is acceptance and sort of being okay with things that occur. So, memento mori, just accept your fate and do the best you can to make whatever comes your way a new opportunity to create purpose and meaning for people around you.
Absolutely. It's so much.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah.